Hi, I am Dr. Samir bin Osman, and in this video we're going to talk about the principles of politics, which is the provision and regulation of shared goods and services to a defined population in a defined geographical border. So, politics only exists because of political powers that can control it, and those are of mainly four types. And the political entities can range all the way down from tribes to all the way up to foreign and sovereign states. But the four powers exist across all of them. So first is the coercion power, which is the power to force people to conform to the laws through fines or arrests or imprisonment or even death sentence. And then also has coercion power to force other societies to comply through the use of armies. The second power is the financial power, and it controls basically who gets more or less investment or resources, and it controls also coercion, which requires money to operate, and it can also coerce the legal power. So basically it can coerce any other power. It exerts influence on any other power. So the legal power then determines what is allowed and forbidden in a society and regulates economic activity, public life, family matters, and even in some cases personal life. And then the fourth power is influence power or mental influence power. And that influences what people know first, and depending on, and by extension, how they think and the political choices and leader they support or rebel against. And mind influence includes writings, songs, or news, social media, movies, as well as public demonstrations such as strikes or riots, marches, civil disobedience, or propaganda, which is kind of the diffusion of partial or complete lies, etc. So these four powers, they will vary proportionally as a result of the political leadership and environmental factors. So let's talk about political leadership. Some personality traits, as we saw in psychology, they are determined by genetics as well as by the environment, and some people will be predisposed to political leadership. And so both good and bad leaderships tend to share four traits, which are self-confidence, intelligence, determination to reach their goal, and then sociability, which is the ability to relate and connect with people. In addition to that, good leaders have another trait, which is integrity, while bad leaders or dictators, they will have a trait called narcissism, which is thinking that they're basically better than everyone else and everyone should be there to serve them. And that's usually actually fueled by an inner insecurity. And that's going to be manifested in their dishonesty, manipulation, and so forth. So this explains why there is kind of emergence of political leadership. Now, most people do not possess political leadership traits and would rather actively or passively follow those leaders. And that's why there is hardly ever societies with no leaders. There will always be emergence of leaders and people who follow them. Now, no leader is going to lead alone, but through what we call circles of influence, whereby a select group called the inner circle will closely surround the leader, and they believe in their project or their power, and they will project their power downstream. And then they will be surrounded by another group, which is the influential beneficiaries, who will possess either coercion powers like commanders or people who lead militias, etc., or financial powers like bankers or aristocracy in Western Europe at some point, business leaders, etc. Or they possess mind influence powers such as priests or poets or journalists, etc. And many of which will benefit from the system, and in exchange of which they will keep the majority of people that are basically the sympathizers compliant and happy with the system, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Now, what's the second factor that contributes to the four political forces? That's environmental factors. And so, like we said in geography and history, the environment and the geography and the enablers, natural resources or lack thereof, know-how or lack thereof, group organization or lack thereof, as well as the challenges that these people faced throughout time, shortages, oppressions, combats, etc., they will form basically an identity of these people and how they see themselves. and how they see other people. So they can see themselves as superior, or on the contrary, inferior. They can identify themselves as missionary people. They can identify themselves as trader. They can identify traders. They can identify themselves as conquerors, etc. And this is going to influence the type of political leaders that emerge in those societies, and then produce very, very significantly different political systems at different times in their history. Now, political leaders can also work with other societies to reach compromises on the use of shared resources, for example, rivers or resources that span across, etc. And they do so through diplomacy. And it works as long as the two groups are in mutual understanding. But oftentimes, there is one group that will inevitably get more powerful than the other and try to get more of what the other considers their fair share. And so the conflict can escalate and escalate until it reaches war. And we spoke about war in history, in the principles of history, so we can go more details there. But suffice to say is that, war is one of the tools by which political systems interact or try to force others into giving them more of the shared resources. Because remember, politics is about getting shared resources and dividing them among people that the political system controls. So then, as the world is gradually moving away from open wars to get those resources that the others consider, that they're worthy of getting, there is another tool that they're using, which is kind of the influence or replacement tool, basically trying to replace the leaders of the other political system that's weaker, to put one that's more compliant with what they need. And that's becoming more and more prevalent, especially because it's less visible to the naked eye and easier to hide, and also because it's less costly on resources than open wars. And so when those leaders of the weaker political system or entity or human group are replaced, the resulting ones that are put in place, that are imposed, basically leaders, they will derive their powers from the foreign society instead of deriving them from their own people. And therefore, they will create circles of influence that mostly serve the foreign society as well as enriching themselves at the expense of their own citizens. Almost all the time, it will be at the expense of their own citizens. So how do these factors make different political systems? So based on the leadership traits and environmental circumstances that we discussed, there are basically two main broad categories of systems that can emerge, either autocracies or democracies. So autocracies start basically with one person and then can evolve into hereditary dynasties where leadership is passed to the children of the leader and then their children or their family and stays basically within the family. So autocracies can be actually more efficient than democracies at producing decisions, at executing decisions and getting to the results. However, the nature of those results tends to reflect the personality traits of the leaders, which can be either good, and then the decisions will be beneficial to their societies and to other societies, or they can be beneficial to their societies at the expense of other societies. However, in most cases, they will veer towards the personal enrichment of the leader and their kind of circles at the expense of the citizens, and then lead towards aggression towards their own people or dishonesty, and as well as aggression and dishonesty towards other societies. This can last until some event in history, either environmental or technological or ideological, enables other leaders to amass enough of the political powers that we spoke about, one of the four or all of the four, to start what we call a revolution to upend the dynasty. And then they would produce a different system, or in some cases they can produce a similar system just with different leaders, basically, one nail replacing another nail. Now, and by opposition, democracies are political systems where citizens are consulted in some or most important decisions, and some include even the choice of the leader. These can be more beneficial to the interests of the citizen of that system, who can voice their opinions through initiatives or referendums or elections of representatives and leaders and so forth. They can, however, suffer from slow time to action and can be corrupted through the mind influence power that leads citizens to make ill-informed choices because they're not going to tell them everything they need to know. And those choices will typically disproportionately serve those who have enough financial power to exert the mind influence at scale. So the political systems don't work in a vacuum. They need political institutions to operate. So every system is going to produce more or less subsystems, but they fall into three main categories. They can be basically bodies that make the laws. They could be parliaments or congresses, etc. And then there could be bodies that check the laws, so that, such as, you know, the executive bodies that validate the laws and use them to allocate and regulate shared resources. And then they can be bodies that check the laws, such as legal bodies, courts, Supreme Court, etc., that basically will observe divergences from the laws, as well as ensure that the laws that are written are in accordance with the broad lines of what the system thinks of itself as of what it should be. And that vision of the system on itself is codified in short documents, which we call constitutions. So basically, the legal bodies, Supreme Courts, they will verify the constitutionality of laws and whether they follow the constitution that was designed by this political system. Now, it's important to note that in autocracies, most, if not all, of these branches will be controlled by the autocrat. Many societies, after decades and centuries of trial and error and successive revolutions and counter-revolutions, try to prevent this kind of concentration of power by the autocrat by dividing a system of what they call the separation of powers, and so making each branch prone and subject to regulation or dissolution by the other in what's called the checks and balances. So no one of these branches can be controlled all at the same time by one person. Oftentimes, leaders from political groups form kind of groups that they call political parties, and the objective of the political parties is to multiply their mind influence power, to reach more people, to gather more groups, to put them to use in their vision. Other political tools include non-governmental political organizations like think tanks or partisan organizations or lobbying groups or unions, etc., all of which exert either financial or mind influence powers, or both, on political parties or governments and even on citizens. So how do these political systems perform, and how can we assess their performance? Well, the performance of a political system can be measured, let's say, as the efficiency and fairness with which it distributes shared resources, because again, politics is the distribution of shared resources amongst the people who belong to that political system. And so different systems will exert more or less control on regions, on services, and on the economy. These are the three levers that I identified. There may be more, but I think these are the kind of the most important ones. So control over regions, it can be either completely centralized by the government, or it can be, on the other side, decentralized. So when it's centralized, it's going to lead to more standardization of the way the rules are made, the way the laws are made, etc. But sometimes it lacks the flexibility to accommodate differences in each region's needs, especially if regions are geographically different or have different densities of people, different industries, etc. And so, on the other side, this is best served by relegating more autonomy to the regions and allowing them to manage their resources how they see fit, such as in federal systems. However, it's important to note that many of those federal systems, they may suffer from redundancy of the administration, because they will have a central administration as well as a federal administration, and then they may lack standardization of laws and regulations and things of that nature. The second lever, like I said, is the control over shared resources, whereby some political governments will take full control or dominant control of certain services, such as defense, manufacturing, or energy production, or utilities, or health insurance, etc., through what they call nationalization, while other systems go the other extreme and completely outsource, either partially or completely outsource them to commercial companies, i.e. the private sector. So lack of competition on one side can often create disincentives to innovate, and reduces actually over time the efficiency of the services. which can happen with public and private entities, by the way, because private entities can also become monopolies, and then when they become monopolies, there's no incentive to innovate, and then we fall into the same problem. So performance systems, they seek a happy medium between the two by creating a level playing field for competition to occur and keeping the competition in line with what the government wants, i.e. Serving the interests of the people. The third lever is control over the economy. So some systems can exert on one end of the spectrum full control over the economy by basically either completely banning or limiting private enterprises, and then they tend to lose the efficiency of markets and the economies. They're not going to be as efficient as free markets on the other side of the spectrum that collectively produce more competition. And so these systems that are completely kind of controlling the economy, they end up over time generating parallel markets, what we call black markets, in which the goods that are not allowed in the general market will be exchanged and sold, etc. And then that's going to lead to definitely to government officials knowing about those black markets, but in order to close an eye, they will need to get some corruption, and so that will lead to corruption of government officials and pass-throughs, etc., and loopholes, etc. Conversely, on the other side of the spectrum, free market systems are much more efficient and adaptive at producing innovative goods and then changing those goods often and producing them at a lower prices, competitive prices, and also producing higher choice for the people in the economy. But if left unchecked and unregulated, they can lead to market manipulation by companies that will buy each other to become more dominant in their sectors, to become oligopolies or monopolies, and then we come back to the problem of reducing competition, which leads to inefficiency, which leads to higher prices and lower services, etc. And so you can see that it's not an easy feat to have a political system that is efficient on all grounds, and also there is also room for corruption of the political system. So let's talk about that. So political corruption significantly inhibits its performance and significantly impacts negatively the people that live under its rule. So there's always some individuals or businesses or political entities either within this political system or from foreign systems that will always seek to corrupt the system by disproportionately making it serve their short-term perceived benefits or interests. Of course, always at the expense of the rest of the people. So some examples of the corruption include bribery or favoritism, or exploiting loopholes in laws and regulations to serve their own interest, or leveraging propaganda or meddling with elections and that sort of thing. On the other end, political systems can be corrupted just by their aging, and they become basically arcane systems, and they refuse to adapt to technological changes, to human changes. They will lack the investment in the renovation of the system, the lack of investment in the workforce, in the administrative workforce, the lack of reinventing the entire system and operating processes, and so they become kind of clunky organizations and clunky political systems. And so as you can see, there is no system that is immune from corruption or aging, and therefore its performance will always diminish with time unless updated constantly to patch the vulnerabilities and to make it always up to date with the demand of the people and the demand of the environment. And with that, we reach the end of the principles of political systems. I welcome your feedback. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.